The forgotten heroes nobody talks about, in the vast tapestry of human history, where the threads of time weave together tales of triumph and tragedy, there exists a shadow realm of forgotten heroes whose extraordinary deeds have been obscured by the passage of time. These remarkable individuals shaped our world in ways we can scarcely imagine, yet their names have faded from collective memory like distant echoes in an ancient hall. They are the unsung champions who walked among us, their courage blazing through the darkest nights of human struggle, their innovations transforming the very fabric of our existence, their sacrifices securing freedoms we now take for granted. Today, we embark on a journey to resurrect these lost souls from the depths of obscurity, to shine light upon their extraordinary contributions, and to ask ourselves why history has been so selective in choosing whom to remember. As we peel back the layers of time, we will discover that behind every celebrated figure stands a constellation of forgotten heroes whose stories deserve to be told, whose legacies deserve to be honored, and whose lives deserve to inspire generations yet unborn. This is not merely a recounting of historical facts. It is an act of restoration, a reclamation of human dignity, and a tribute to those who gave everything while asking for nothing in return. Introduction: The architecture of memory history is not merely a collection of facts and dates, but rather a carefully constructed narrative shaped by those who hold the power to tell the story. Throughout human civilization, the tales that survive the ravages of time are often those that serve the interests of the powerful, reinforce existing social hierarchies, or align with prevailing cultural values. This selective memory has created vast blind spots in our collective understanding of the past, leaving countless remarkable individuals languishing in the shadows of anonymity. The forgotten heroes we will explore in this journey represent diverse backgrounds, cultures, and historical periods, yet they share a common fate. Their contributions were minimized, their stories suppressed, or their achievements attributed to others. Some were marginalized due to their gender, race, or social class. Others were simply overshadowed by more charismatic contemporaries or lost in the tumult of major historical events. Still others made discoveries so far ahead of their time that society was not ready to recognize their significance. What unites them all is their extraordinary impact on human progress and their unjust exclusion from the pantheon of historical recognition. As we delve into their stories, we must confront uncomfortable truths about how history is recorded and whose voices are amplified. We must question why certain narratives are elevated while others are silenced. And most importantly, we must acknowledge that our understanding of the past is incomplete without these forgotten heroes, whose inclusion not only sets the historical record straight, but also provides inspiration and role models for those who have historically been underrepresented in our collective memory. This journey through the lives of the unsung champions of history is more than an act of remembrance. It is a reimagining of what history can be when we embrace all its voices and celebrate all its contributors. Chapter 1: Mary Anning, the fossil hunter of Lyme Regis in the early 19th century, when the scientific world was dominated by wealthy gentlemen scholars. A young woman from a working-class family in Lyme Regis, England, was making discoveries that would revolutionize our understanding of prehistoric life. Mary Anning was born in 1799 into a family of limited means but boundless curiosity. Her father, a cabinet maker and amateur fossil collector, taught her and her brother how to search the treacherous cliffs along the Jurassic coast for ancient treasures hidden within the limestone and shale. When tragedy struck and her father died in 1810, leaving the family in debt, 11-year-old Mary turned to fossil hunting not merely as a passion, but as a means of survival. The cliffs of Lyme Regis were dangerous, prone to sudden landslides that had already claimed lives, but Mary possessed an uncanny ability to spot fossils that others missed. Her keen eye and patient persistence led to extraordinary discoveries that would challenge the prevailing understanding of Earth's history. At just 12 years old, with her brother Joseph, she uncovered the first complete ichthyosaur skeleton, a marine reptile that had never been properly identified. This remarkable find drew the attention of the scientific community, though as a woman and a member of the working class, Mary was barred from fully participating in scientific societies or publishing her findings in academic journals. Despite these barriers, she continued her work with relentless determination, making groundbreaking discoveries including the first plesiosaur skeleton, the first pterosaur skeleton found outside Germany, and numerous important fossils of fish and other prehistoric creatures. Her observations about coprolites, fossilized feces, and the significance of belemnite fossils were ahead of their time, contributing to the emerging understanding of extinction and geological time. Yet while male geologists and paleontologists built their careers on her specimens and insights, Mary Anning remained on the margins of scientific recognition, often struggling financially despite the importance of her contributions. The Geological Society of London, which would not admit women as members until 1904, decades after her death, occasionally acknowledged her work but never fully credited her scientific insights. Mary's story illustrates how gender and class barriers in the 19th century scientific community prevented many talented women from receiving the recognition they deserved. Her struggles were not merely professional but deeply personal, as she navigated a society that questioned the propriety of a woman engaging in such physically demanding and intellectually challenging work. Despite these obstacles, Mary Anning's contributions laid crucial groundwork for the field of paleontology and helped establish the concept of deep time that would influence Charles Darwin and other evolutionary thinkers. Her legacy reminds us that scientific progress has often depended on individuals operating outside established institutions, whose insights and discoveries have transformed our understanding of the natural world. Today, as we walk through museums displaying the fossils she discovered, we honor not just the ancient creatures she uncovered, but the remarkable woman who dedicated her life to revealing Earth's deep history, despite the barriers that sought to limit her participation in the scientific conversation. Chapter 2: Lewis Howard Latimer, the illuminator behind the light in the pantheon of American inventors. Thomas Edison's name shines brightly, while the contributions of many who helped bring electric light to the world remain in relative darkness. Among these forgotten figures is Lewis Howard Latimer, an African-American inventor whose technical innovations were crucial to the widespread adoption of electric lighting. Born in 1848 in Chelsea, Massachusetts, to parents who had escaped slavery, Latimer's early life was marked by both promise and hardship. His father, George Latimer, was captured under the Fugitive Slave Act in 1842, prompting a high-profile legal case that galvanized the abolitionist movement and ultimately secured his freedom. This formative family history instilled in young Lewis a profound understanding of both the possibilities and limitations facing African Americans in the 19th century. Despite receiving only a formal education until the age of 10, Latimer's intellectual curiosity and mechanical aptitude were evident from an early age. He taught himself mechanical drawing while working in a patent attorney's office, developing skills that would prove invaluable throughout his career. During the Civil War, Latimer volunteered for the Union Navy, serving as a landsman on the USS Massasoit. After the war, he returned to Boston and found employment with Crosby and Good, a patent law firm where his talent for technical drawings quickly earned him a promotion to head draftsman. It was in this capacity that Latimer first encountered Alexander Graham Bell, hiring on to create the drawings for Bell's telephone patent application. Latimer's precise and detailed drawings were instrumental in helping Bell secure his patent in 1876, beating out competing claims by just hours. This collaboration with Bell marked the beginning of Latimer's association with pioneering inventors of the era. In 1879, Latimer relocated to Bridgeport, Connecticut, where he was hired as a draftsman by the U.S. Electric Lighting Company, a subsidiary of the Hiram Maxim Light Company. It was here that Latimer began his most significant work in the field of electric lighting. While Edison had invented the incandescent light bulb, his early models had a serious flaw. The carbon filament burned out too quickly, making electric lighting impractical for widespread use. Latimer tackled this problem with characteristic ingenuity, developing a new carbon filament manufacturing process that produced longer-lasting, more efficient bulbs. His 1881 patent for this process represented a major breakthrough in electric lighting technology. Latimer's improved filament made electric bulbs more durable and affordable, helping to transform electric lighting from a novelty into a practical technology for homes and businesses. Beyond his technical innovations, Latimer authored the first book on electric lighting, Incandescent Electric Lighting, a practical description of the Edison system, in 1890. This comprehensive guide helped engineers and technicians understand and implement electric lighting systems, accelerating the adoption of this transformative technology. In 1884, Latimer was invited to join the Edison Electric Light Company in New York, where he became the only African-American member of the engineering division known as Edison's Pioneers. In this role, Latimer served as an expert witness in patent litigation cases, defending Edison's patents against competitors. His deep understanding of electrical technology and his articulate testimony proved invaluable in these legal battles, helping to secure Edison's dominance in the emerging electric industry. Despite his crucial contributions to the development and commercialization of electric lighting, Latimer's name has been largely overshadowed by more famous contemporaries. As an African American working in a field dominated by white inventors and industrialists, he faced significant barriers to recognition and advancement. Yet Latimer's technical innovations, particularly his improved carbon filament, were essential to making electric lighting practical and affordable for everyday use. His story exemplifies how many technological breakthroughs attributed to a single inventor often depend on the contributions of numerous engineers, technicians, and innovators working behind the scenes. Lewis Howard Latimer's journey from the son of escaped slaves to a key figure in bringing electric light to the world is a testament to both individual brilliance and the collective nature of technological progress. His legacy reminds us that innovation thrives on diversity and that many of the conveniences we take for granted today were made possible by individuals whose names have been lost to history, even as their contributions continue to illuminate our world. Chapter 3: Katherine Johnson, the mathematical mind behind the moon, landing long before calculators and computers became commonplace. When space exploration was still the stuff of science fiction, a brilliant African-American mathematician was performing the complex calculations that would eventually launch humans into space and bring them safely home. Katherine Johnson was born in 1918 in White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia, where her innate mathematical abilities were evident from an early age. She was so advanced that by the time she was 10 years old, she had already completed all the courses offered at her local school. Recognizing their daughter's extraordinary talent, her parents made the difficult decision to send her to high school in Institute, West Virginia, on the campus of West Virginia State College, as there were no educational opportunities for African Americans beyond the 8th grade in their hometown. Johnson's academic journey continued at West Virginia State College, where she excelled in mathematics under the mentorship of Professor W. W. Skeefelin Claytor, the third African American to earn a Ph.D. in mathematics. Claytor recognized Johnson's exceptional abilities and created special courses just for her, including analytic geometry. Johnson graduated summa cum laude in 1937 with degrees in mathematics and French at the age of 18. She began her career as a teacher, but dreamed of using her mathematical talents in more challenging ways. In 1953, Johnson heard that the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, NACA, NASA's predecessor, was hiring African American women to serve as human computers. These women performed complex mathematical calculations for the engineers working on aerospace projects. Johnson applied and was hired, joining the West Area Computing Section at Langley Research Center in Hampton, Virginia. This segregated unit of African American female mathematicians was tasked with processing the vast amounts of data generated by wind tunnel tests and flight experiments. Johnson's mathematical skills quickly set her apart, and her curiosity and persistence led her to ask questions about the projects she was working on, eventually moving from a computer to a member of the research team. Her ability to visualize complex mathematical problems and her precision in calculations made her invaluable to the engineers. In 1958, when NACA became NASA and desegregated, Johnson joined the Space Task Force, where she would work on some of the most important missions in the history of space exploration. Johnson calculated the trajectory for Alan Shepard's 1961 flight, the first American in space, and verified the calculations for John Glenn's 1962 orbit around the Earth. Glenn was so impressed with Johnson's work that he personally requested she check the electronic computer's calculations before his flight, stating, "If she says they're good, then I'm ready to go." This trust in Johnson's mathematical abilities highlights the crucial role she played in the early days of the space program, even as she faced discrimination as both an African American and a woman in a field dominated by white men. Johnson's most significant contribution came during the Apollo missions, particularly Apollo 11, the first mission to land humans on the moon. She calculated the trajectory that would take the Apollo spacecraft from Earth to the moon and back, taking into account the gravitational pulls of both Earth and the moon. Her calculations were so precise that they allowed the lunar module to land on the moon's surface with limited fuel and return safely to Earth. When an emergency arose during the Apollo 13 mission, Johnson's work on backup procedures and charts helped guide the crew safely back to Earth. Despite her crucial contributions to the space program, Johnson remained relatively unknown to the public for decades. Her story, like those of the other African American women mathematicians at NASA, was largely overlooked in historical accounts of the space race. It wasn't until the 2016 book, Hidden Figures by Margaret Lee Shetterly, and the subsequent film adaptation that Johnson and her colleagues received widespread recognition. In 2015, at the age of 97, Johnson was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom, America's highest civilian honor, by President Barack Obama. Katherine Johnson's journey from a small town in West Virginia to the halls of NASA exemplifies both the barriers faced by African Americans and women in STEM fields and the extraordinary contributions they have made despite these obstacles. Her mathematical brilliance helped turn the dream of space exploration into reality, yet for decades, her name was absent from the narrative of America's achievements in space. Her story reminds us that behind every celebrated achievement in science and technology are often numerous individuals whose contributions have been overlooked due to prejudice, institutional barriers, or simply the tendency of history to focus on a few prominent figures. Johnson's legacy is not just in the mathematical calculations that guided spacecraft through the cosmos, but in the inspiration she provides to future generations of scientists and mathematicians, particularly those from underrepresented groups. Her life demonstrates that talent and perseverance can overcome even the most formidable barriers, and that the pursuit of knowledge knows no boundaries of race or gender. Chapter 4, Qin Xiangwu, the First Lady of Physics in the World of Particle Physics, where the fundamental building blocks of the universe are probed and understood, the name Qin Xiang Wu stands as a testament to both scientific brilliance and the persistent undervaluation of women in science. Born in 1912 in Liu, China, Wu grew up in a time of tremendous political and social upheaval in her country. Her father, an engineer, believed strongly in education for girls, a progressive view for early 20th century China. Wu attended the National Central University in Nanjing, where she studied physics and developed a passion for understanding the fundamental laws governing the natural world. After graduating in 1934, she worked for a year before deciding to pursue advanced studies in the United States. In 1936, Wu arrived in America with plans to study at the University of Michigan, but upon learning that women were not allowed to use the front entrance at Michigan's Student Union, she chose instead to attend the University of California, Berkeley, where she would study under some of the leading physicists of the time, including Ernest O. Lawrence and J. Robert Oppenheimer. At Berkeley, Wu quickly distinguished herself as an exceptional experimental physicist. Her doctoral research focused on the decay of radioactive elements, specifically studying the beta decay of xenon. She earned her PhD in 1940 and was recognized for her innovative experimental techniques and meticulous attention to detail. Despite her obvious talent, Wu faced significant barriers as both a woman and an Asian immigrant in the American scientific community. Academic positions were scarce for women in physics, and Wu was initially unable to secure a faculty position. Instead, she took a research position at Smith College and later at Princeton University, where she became the first female instructor in the physics department. Wu's career took a significant turn during World War II when she joined the Manhattan Project, the secret U.S. effort to develop atomic weapons. Her expertise in beta decay and radiation detection made her valuable to the project, and she worked under the direction of physicist Emilio Seger at Berkeley's Radiation Laboratory, helping to develop the process for separating uranium isotopes for use in atomic bombs. Wu's contributions to the Manhattan Project were crucial, yet like many women scientists working on the project, her role was largely unacknowledged in official accounts. After the war, Wu continued her research in particle physics, joining Columbia University in 1944, where she would remain for the rest of her career. It was at Columbia that Wu would conduct her most famous experiment, one that would challenge fundamental assumptions about the nature of physical laws. In 1956, theoretical physicists Tsung-Dao Lee and Chen Ning-Yang proposed that the law of parity conservation, which had been accepted as a fundamental principle of physics, might not apply to weak interactions, one of the four fundamental forces of nature. They approached Wu to design an experiment to test their hypothesis. Wu's experiment involved studying the beta decay of cobalt-60 at extremely low temperatures. She and her team carefully aligned the nuclear spins of cobalt-60 atoms and observed the direction in which electrons were emitted during beta decay. If parity were conserved, the electrons would be emitted equally in all directions. However, Wu's experiment revealed that the electrons were emitted preferentially in one direction, demonstrating unequivocally that parity was not conserved in weak interactions. This groundbreaking discovery overturned a fundamental assumption in physics and sent shockwaves through the scientific community. In 1957, Li and Yang were awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics for their theoretical work on parity violation, but Wu, whose experimental work had been essential to confirming their theory, was not included in the prize. This omission is widely considered one of the most significant injustices in the history of the Nobel Prizes. Wu's experimental design was ingenious, her execution flawless, and her results definitive. Without her work, the theoretical proposal would have remained just that, a theory. Despite being passed over for the Nobel Prize, Wu received numerous other honors for her contributions to physics, including the Comstock Prize in Physics in 1964 and the National Medal of Science in 1975. She became the first female president of the American Physical Society and was widely respected for her experimental skills and scientific integrity. Yet her name never achieved the recognition of her male contemporaries, and her story remains largely unknown outside the physics community. Qin Xiangwu's career exemplifies both the crucial contributions of women to scientific progress and the systemic barriers that have prevented many women scientists from receiving the recognition they deserve. Her work fundamentally changed our understanding of the basic laws governing the universe, yet her name is rarely mentioned alongside the great physicists of the 20th century. Wu's legacy extends beyond her scientific achievements. She was also a passionate advocate for human rights and equality in science. After retiring from Columbia, she dedicated herself to encouraging young people, especially girls and young women, to pursue careers in science and mathematics. Her life reminds us that scientific progress depends on both theoretical insight and experimental verification, and that both aspects of scientific discovery deserve equal recognition. It also serves as a powerful reminder that talent knows no boundaries of gender or ethnicity, and that the advancement of human knowledge requires the participation of all people, regardless of their background. Chapter 5: Sybil Ludington, the Midnight Rider of the Revolution in the Annals of American Revolutionary History. The story of Paul Revere's Midnight Ride has been immortalized in poetry and legend, while another equally daring ride through the darkness of revolutionary America has largely faded from historical memory. Sybil Ludington, a 16-year-old girl from New York, embarked on a journey that night that would prove crucial to the American cause, yet her name remains unfamiliar to most Americans. Born in 1761 in Fredericksburg, New York, Sybil was the eldest of 12 children of Colonel Henry Ludington, a militia commander who served in the American Revolutionary Forces. Growing up in a household deeply committed to the patriot cause, Sybil would have been well aware of the stakes of the conflict between the American colonies and British rule. Her life changed dramatically on the night of April 26, 1777, when a rider arrived at the Ludington home with news that British forces were attacking Danbury, Connecticut, and burning the town. Colonel Ludington needed to rally his local militia, but was occupied with organizing the defense and could not make the ride himself. With his men scattered across the countryside and the night growing darker, someone needed to alert them to gather for the defense. In a moment that would test her courage and endurance, 16-year-old Sybil volunteered to make the perilous journey through the hostile countryside. Mounting her horse, Star, Sybil set out into the night, riding through rain and darkness along unfamiliar roads. Her route covered approximately 40 miles, nearly double the distance of Paul Revere's more famous ride. She rode from her home in what is now Kent, New York, through the towns of Carmel, Mahopac, and Stormville, knocking on farmhouse doors and calling out to the militia members to gather at her father's command. The journey was fraught with danger. Sybil faced the threat of British loyalists, highwaymen, and wild animals in the wilderness. She used a stick to prod her horse and knock on doors, as she did not have a horn like Paul Revere to announce her arrival. Despite the challenging conditions and her young age, Sybil completed her mission successfully, arriving back at the Ludington home around dawn, having gathered nearly 400 militiamen to join the fight against the British. The militia led by Colonel Ludington arrived in Danbury in time to help push back the British forces, though not before the town suffered significant damage. General George Washington himself later visited the Ludington home to express his gratitude for Sybil's heroic ride. Despite the recognition she received from military leaders, Sybil Ludington's story never achieved the legendary status of Paul Revere's ride. Several factors may have contributed to this disparity in historical memory. Revere's ride was immortalized by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow's 1861 poem, Paul Revere's Ride, which elevated his actions to mythic proportions in the American consciousness. No similar literary work celebrated Sibyl's journey. Additionally, as a young woman in the 18th century, Sibyl's contributions were likely seen as exceptional rather than representative of women's roles in the Revolution, making her story less likely to be included in standard historical narratives. Yet Sybil Ludington's ride was arguably more challenging and strategically significant than Revere's. She traveled a greater distance, through more difficult terrain, and in worse weather conditions. The militia she helped gather played a crucial role in the ongoing defense of the Hudson Valley, a strategically important region in the Revolutionary War. After the war, Sybil married Edward Ogden in 1784 and had one son. She lived until the age of 77, dying in 1839. For many years, her heroic ride was remembered primarily in local histories and family accounts. It wasn't until the 20th century that her story began to receive broader recognition. In 1935, New York State erected historical markers along the route of her ride, and in 1975, she was honored on a U.S. postage stamp as part of the Contributors to the Cause series commemorating the American Revolution. Today, statues of Sybil Ludington stand in Carmel, New York, and Washington, D.C., and her story is taught in some schools as an example of women's contributions to the American Revolution. Yet she remains far less known than her male counterpart, Paul Revere, whose midnight ride has become a symbol of American patriotism and courage. Sybil Ludington's story reminds us that historical memory is selective and often shaped by factors beyond the significance of events themselves. Her ride exemplifies the courage and determination of countless women who contributed to the American Revolution, but whose stories have been marginalized or forgotten. It challenges us to look beyond the familiar narratives of history and to recognize the diverse individuals who shaped the course of events, often at great personal risk. Sibyl's journey through the darkness of revolutionary America is more than an exciting tale of youthful bravery. It is a testament to the idea that heroism knows no age or gender, and that the struggle for freedom and independence depended on the courage of ordinary people facing extraordinary circumstances. Chapter 6, Bessie Coleman breaking barriers in the clouds in the early days of aviation, when flying was still a dangerous and daring pursuit. A young African-American woman from Texas defied racial and gender barriers to become the first licensed black pilot in the world. Bessie Coleman was born in 1892 in Atlanta, Texas, one of 13 children in a family of sharecroppers. Her early life was marked by poverty and racial segregation, but also by a fierce determination to rise above her circumstances. Coleman's education was limited by the realities of life for African Americans in the Jim Crow South, with schools for black children often underfunded and offering only basic instruction. Despite these limitations, Coleman developed a love for reading and a thirst for knowledge that would drive her throughout her life. At the age of 23, Coleman moved to Chicago, where she lived with her brothers and worked as a manicurist. It was in Chicago that she first heard stories of World War I pilots and became fascinated with the idea of flying. Her brothers, who had served in France during the war, regaled her with tales of women pilots in Europe, sparking a dream that would seem impossible to most people in her position. In the United States of the 1920s, aviation schools did not accept African Americans, and even white women faced significant barriers to becoming pilots. Undeterred by these obstacles, Coleman began to formulate a plan that would take her far from the racial segregation of America. With encouragement from Robert Abbott, publisher of the Chicago Defender, one of the most important African American newspapers of the time, Coleman decided to go to France to pursue her dream of flying. She took a second job to save money and began studying French at night. In 1920, with financial support from Abbott and another benefactor, Coleman set sail for France. Her journey to becoming a pilot was not easy. She arrived in Paris unable to speak the language fluently and faced cultural barriers as well. Nevertheless, she enrolled in aviation school and proved to be a natural pilot, impressing her instructors with her skill and determination. On June 15, 1921, Coleman received her international pilot's license from the Fédération Aéronautique Internationale, becoming the first African-American woman to earn a pilot's license. Her achievement was remarkable, not only because of her race and gender, but also because she had accomplished it in a foreign country, far from the support systems of family and community. When Coleman returned to the United States, she was greeted as a celebrity in African American communities. Newspapers across the country covered her achievement, and she quickly became a symbol of what Black people could accomplish despite the limitations imposed by racism. However, Coleman found that her license alone was not enough to secure the opportunities she needed to build a career as a pilot. Commercial aviation was still in its infancy, and exhibition flying, or barnstorming, was one of the few ways pilots could earn money. But Coleman knew she needed more advanced training to perform the aerial stunts that would draw crowds. Once again, she returned to Europe for additional training, this time in Germany and the Netherlands, where she learned aerobatic maneuvers from some of the best pilots in the world. By the time she returned to the United States in 1922, Coleman was prepared to launch her career as an exhibition pilot. She adopted the nickname Queen Bess and quickly became one of the most popular daredevil pilots in the country. Her aerial shows drew large crowds of both Black and white spectators, and she used her fame to speak out against racial inequality, refusing to perform at venues that were segregated. Coleman had big dreams for the future of aviation. She wanted to open a flying school for African Americans, believing that aviation could offer new opportunities and a sense of pride to Black people at a time when they were systematically denied opportunities in many other fields. She saved money from her exhibition flying and began planning for her school, which she intended to call the Bessie Coleman Aero Club. Tragically, Coleman would not live to see her dream realized. On April 30, 1926, during a rehearsal for an air show in Jacksonville, Florida, Coleman's plane unexpectedly went into a dive and spun out. She was thrown from the plane and fell to her death. She was only 34 years old. The investigation into the crash revealed that a wrench had been left in the engine, causing the malfunction that led to the accident. Coleman's death was met with an outpouring of grief from African American communities across the country. Thousands attended her funeral in Chicago, and her legacy inspired a new generation of Black pilots. In 1929, the Bessie Coleman Aero Club, named in her honor, finally opened in Chicago, fulfilling her dream of providing aviation opportunities to African Americans. Throughout her career, Coleman faced discrimination and danger, but she never wavered in her determination to fly. She once said, "The air is the only place free from prejudices." In the skies, she could transcend the racial barriers that constrained her life on the ground. Her courage and perseverance opened doors for future generations of African Americans in aviation, including the Tuskegee Airmen, the group of Black fighter pilots who would distinguish themselves during World War II. Today, Bessie Coleman is recognized as a pioneer in aviation and a symbol of determination against overwhelming odds. Her story reminds us that heroes often emerge from the most unlikely circumstances, driven by a vision of what could be rather than limited by what is. In breaking barriers in the clouds, Coleman not only achieved her personal dream of flying, but also expanded the horizon of possibilities for all who would follow in her wake. Chapter 7. Vasily Arkhipov, the man who saved the world in the tense days of October 1962, when the world stood on the brink of nuclear annihilation during the Cuban Missile Crisis. One man's courage and restraint in the face of extreme pressure may have prevented a catastrophe of unimaginable proportions. Vasily Arkhipov, a Soviet naval officer, found himself at the center of a crisis that could have ended human civilization as we know it, yet his story remained largely unknown for decades. Born in 1926 in a town near Moscow, Arkhipov grew up in the Soviet Union during a period of tremendous upheaval and transformation. His family background was working class, and his early life was shaped by the challenges facing ordinary Soviet citizens during the rapid industrialization and political purges of the 1930s. Arkhipov showed academic promise and was able to pursue higher education, attending the Pacific Higher Naval School in the Far East. His naval career began during World War II, and he served in the Soviet Pacific Fleet during the conflict against Japan. After the war, Arkhipov continued his military education, attending the Caspian Higher Naval School and later the Kirov Naval Academy. His expertise in submarine operations made him a valuable asset to the Soviet Navy, and he steadily rose through the ranks. By 1962, Arkhipov had gained a reputation as a calm, competent officer who could handle difficult situations with composure. These qualities would be tested to their limits during the Cuban Missile Crisis. In October 1962, when American reconnaissance planes discovered Soviet missile sites under construction in Cuba, the world was thrust into the most dangerous confrontation of the Cold War. As President John F. Kennedy imposed a naval blockade around Cuba and demanded the removal of the missiles, the Soviet Union dispatched a secret flotilla of 4 submarines to the Caribbean. Each submarine was armed with conventional torpedoes and, crucially, 1 nuclear torpedo with a power roughly equivalent to the bomb that destroyed Hiroshima. Arkhipov was serving as second in command and executive officer on one of these submarines, the B-59. The conditions aboard the Soviet submarines were extremely difficult. The vessels were diesel-powered, which meant they needed to surface periodically to recharge their batteries. They were also designed for the colder waters of the North Atlantic, not the tropical Caribbean, and the internal temperatures rose to uncomfortable levels. Communication with Moscow was sporadic at best, leaving the crews largely isolated and forced to make critical decisions without direct guidance from their superiors. On October 27, 1962, at the height of the crisis, the B-59 was detected by American forces in the waters near Cuba. A group of 11 United States Navy destroyers and the aircraft carrier USS Randolph began dropping practice depth charges to force the submarine to surface and identify itself. Inside the B-59, the crew was unaware that these were practice charges. The explosions rocked the submarine, and the temperature inside rose to over 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Carbon dioxide levels were building up, and the crew was suffering from heat and exhaustion. The submarine had been out of contact with Moscow for days, and the crew had no way of knowing whether war had already broken out between the Soviet Union and the United States. Under these extreme conditions, the captain of the B-59, Valentin Savitsky, believed that war had begun and made the fateful decision to launch the nuclear torpedo. The authorization of all 3 senior officers was required to launch the nuclear weapon. Captain Savitsky was in favor, and the political officer, Ivan Maslenikov, also gave his consent. It was Vasily Arkhipov, as second in command, who held the deciding vote. Despite the intense pressure and the deteriorating conditions aboard the submarine, Arkhipov argued against launching the nuclear torpedo. He calmly insisted that they needed to surface and await orders from Moscow before taking such a catastrophic step. His position was extremely unpopular with the other officers, but his rank as flotilla commander and his calm demeanor gave his arguments weight. After a heated debate, Arkhipov persuaded the captain to surface the submarine and await further instructions. When the B-59 surfaced, it was met by American ships, but after establishing communication, the Soviet submarine was allowed to return to base without incident. The world would not learn until decades later how close it had come to nuclear war. Vasily Arkhipov's actions that day prevented what would almost certainly have been a devastating nuclear exchange. Had the B-59 launched its nuclear torpedo, the United States would likely have responded with nuclear force against the Soviet Union, triggering a full-scale nuclear war that could have resulted in the deaths of hundreds of millions of people and the destruction of human civilization. Despite the enormous significance of his actions, Arkhipav's story remained classified for many years. He continued his career in the Soviet Navy, eventually reaching the rank of vice admiral before retiring in the 1980s. He died in 1998, relatively unknown outside naval circles. It was only after the end of the Cold War, with the opening of Soviet archives and the publication of memoirs by participants in the crisis, that Arkhipav's crucial role became known to the wider public. In 2002, Robert McNamara, who had served as U.S. Secretary of Defense during the Cuban Missile Crisis, stated at a conference in Havana that we came very close to nuclear war, and he specifically acknowledged Arkhipav's role in preventing catastrophe. Today, Arkhipov is recognized by historians and arms control experts as a figure of immense importance in 20th century history. His story challenges the traditional narrative of the Cuban Missile Crisis, which tends to focus on the deliberations of political leaders like Kennedy and Khrushchev. Arkhipav's actions remind us that history often turns on the decisions of individuals operating far from the centers of power, whose courage and judgment can shape the course of events in ways that are not immediately apparent. The fact that Arkhipov was a Soviet officer also complicates the simplistic Cold War narrative that often portrays Soviet officials as aggressive and irrational. In a moment of crisis, it was a Soviet officer who showed the restraint and wisdom necessary to prevent nuclear war. Vasily Arkhipov's story is a powerful reminder of the fragility of human civilization and the responsibility that comes with possessing weapons of mass destruction. It also highlights the importance of individual agency in historical events, showing that sometimes one person's courage can make the difference between war and peace, between life and death for millions. In a world that continues to face the threat of nuclear weapons, Arkhipov's example of calm judgment under extreme pressure remains as relevant today as it was in those tense days of October 1962. Chapter 8. Hugh Thompson, the moral compass of my lie in the midst of the Vietnam War, when the lines between right and wrong became blurred by the chaos of conflict. One American helicopter pilot made a courageous stand that would define his legacy and challenge the conscience of a nation. Hugh Thompson, Jr., was born in 1943 in Atlanta, Georgia, and grew up in a military family that valued service and honor. His father had served in World War II, and Thompson was raised with a strong sense of duty and moral responsibility. After graduating from high school, Thompson attended Louisiana State University for a year before enlisting in the United States Navy in 1961. He later transferred to the Army and began flight school, where he trained to become a helicopter pilot. Thompson's military career was marked by professionalism and dedication, and by 1967, he had been deployed to Vietnam as part of the 123rd Aviation Battalion of the 23rd Infantry Division. On March 16, 1968, Thompson was piloting an OH-23 observation helicopter on a reconnaissance mission over the village of My Lai in South Vietnam's Quang Nguy province. What he witnessed from the air that day would horrify him and test his commitment to his moral principles in the face of extreme pressure. As Thompson flew over the village, he saw American soldiers of Charlie Company, 1st Battalion, 20th Infantry Regiment, systematically killing unarmed Vietnamese civilians, including women, children, and elderly people. The soldiers were shooting villagers as they tried to flee, setting fire to their homes and rounding up survivors for execution. Thompson and his crew, door gunner Larry Colburn and crew chief Glenn Andriotta, initially thought they were witnessing a legitimate military operation, but as they watched in horror, it became clear that what was happening was not combat but a massacre of defenseless civilians. As Thompson circled the village, he saw a young Vietnamese woman running toward a rice paddy, wounded and terrified. He landed his helicopter between the advancing American soldiers and the woman, creating a protective barrier. Thompson got out of his helicopter and confronted Lieutenant William Calley, who was leading one of the platoons involved in the killings. When Callie told Thompson to mind his own business, Thompson replied that there were wounded people who needed help. Thompson then noticed that the soldiers were about to kill a group of civilians who had taken shelter in a bunker. He again landed his helicopter, positioning it between the soldiers and the bunker, and told his crew to open fire on the American soldiers if they attempted to harm the civilians. Thompson then coaxed the civilians out of the bunker and called for medical evacuation for the wounded. After ensuring the safety of the civilians he had rescued, Thompson returned to base and immediately reported what he had witnessed to his superiors. His report was met with disbelief and hostility, and he was initially accused of being a traitor for turning against his fellow soldiers. Despite the pressure to remain silent, Thompson persisted in telling the truth about what had happened at My Lai. The events of that day would haunt Thompson for the rest of his life, but he never wavered in his conviction that he had done the right thing. The My Lai massacre, as it came to be known, remained largely hidden from the American public for over a year. It was only after investigative journalist Seymour Hersh broke the story in November 1969 that the full extent of the atrocities became known. The revelation shocked the nation and further eroded public support for the Vietnam War. 26 soldiers were eventually charged with criminal offenses related to the massacre, but only Lieutenant Callie was convicted. He was sentenced to life imprisonment, but served only 3 days under house arrest before being pardoned by President Richard Nixon. For his actions at My Lai, Thompson was initially vilified by many in the military and by supporters of the war. He received death threats and was ostracized by some of his fellow soldiers. Yet he stood by his decision, believing that his duty as a soldier and as a human being required him to protect innocent lives, even if it meant confronting his own comrades. It would take decades for Thompson to receive the recognition he deserved. In 1998, he and his crew members were awarded the Soldier's Medal, the Army's highest award for bravery not involving direct contact with the enemy. The citation praised their heroism and extraordinary bravery in saving civilian lives at My Lai. Thompson's story challenges us to consider the moral complexities of war and the courage required to maintain one's humanity in the midst of conflict. His actions demonstrate that true heroism sometimes involves standing against one's own side when they are in the wrong. In an environment where peer pressure and military hierarchy might have encouraged him to look the other way, Thompson chose to follow his conscience, even at great personal cost. The psychological toll of witnessing the My Lai massacre and the subsequent backlash affected Thompson deeply. He struggled with post-traumatic stress disorder and the moral injury of having seen his fellow soldiers commit atrocities. Yet he never regretted his decision to intervene, often saying that the only thing he regretted was not being able to save more lives. Thompson's legacy extends beyond his actions at My Lai. After leaving the military, he worked as a counselor for veterans dealing with PTSD and spoke publicly about the importance of ethical conduct in warfare. He believed that the lessons of My Lai were not just about the actions of a few rogue soldiers, but about the systemic failures that can lead ordinary people to commit extraordinary acts of violence in the context of war. Hugh Thompson died in 2006, but his story continues to serve as a powerful example of moral courage in the face of overwhelming pressure. His actions remind us that even in the darkest circumstances, individuals have the power to choose between right and wrong, and that those choices can have profound consequences. In the complex and often ambiguous moral landscape of war, Thompson's compass pointed unwaveringly toward humanity, reminding us that the true measure of courage is not in the ability to kill, but in the willingness to protect life, even at great personal risk. Chapter 9, Irina Sendler, the Angel of the Warsaw Ghetto in the darkest days of World War II, when the machinery of the Holocaust was systematically exterminating millions of innocent people. A Polish social worker embarked on a mission of extraordinary courage that would save thousands of children from certain death. Irina Sendler was born in 1910 in Warsaw, Poland, into a Catholic family that instilled in her a deep sense of compassion and social justice. Her father, a physician, died in 1917 from typhus contracted while treating patients whom other doctors refused to help. This example of selfless service to others in need would profoundly influence young Irina and shape her worldview. Sendler studied at Warsaw University, where she became involved in socialist and anti-fascist organizations. Even before the war, she demonstrated her commitment to social justice by opposing the ghetto bench system that segregated Jewish students at the university. When Nazi Germany invaded Poland in 1939, Sendler was working as a social worker for the Warsaw Municipal Department of Social Welfare. As the Nazis implemented their brutal occupation policies, Sendler and her colleagues used their positions to help the most vulnerable, providing false documents and assistance to Jews and others targeted by the regime. In 1940, the Nazis established the Warsaw Ghetto, confining over 400,000 Jews in an area of just 1.3 square miles under horrific conditions. The ghetto became a prison of starvation, disease, and constant terror, with residents facing random violence and deportation to extermination camps. Sendler obtained a permit to enter the ghetto as a public health specialist, ostensibly to inspect sanitary conditions and combat the spread of disease. This official access gave her a unique opportunity to help the Jewish residents, particularly the children. In 1942, as the Nazis began mass deportations from the Warsaw Ghetto to the Treblinka extermination camp, Sendler joined Zagota, the Council to Aid Jews, an underground organization dedicated to saving Jewish lives. She was appointed head of Zagota's children's section and immediately began organizing the rescue of Jewish children from the ghetto. Sendler and her small team of volunteers developed ingenious methods to smuggle children out of the ghetto. They used ambulances to carry children hidden in sacks, coffins, and medical supply boxes. They led children out through sewer pipes and hidden tunnels. They placed infants in toolboxes or potato sacks and carried them out under the noses of Nazi guards. Sometimes they would sedate crying babies to prevent them from alerting the authorities. Each rescue was incredibly dangerous, not only for the children, but for everyone involved. The Nazis imposed the death penalty on anyone caught helping Jews, and this punishment was often extended to the rescuer's entire family. Despite these risks, Sendler and her network continued their work, driven by the conviction that they had to save as many children as possible. Once outside the ghetto, the children needed new identities and safe places to hide. Sendler and her colleagues forged false documents for the children, giving them new names and backgrounds. They then placed the children with Polish families, in Catholic convents and orphanages, or in other institutions willing to risk their lives to protect Jewish children. Sendler kept meticulous records of the children's true identities, writing their names, parents' names, and original addresses on thin slips of paper that she stored in glass jars buried under an apple tree in a friend's garden. Her hope was that after the war, these records would help reunite the children with their families, or at least preserve their connection to their Jewish heritage. In October 1943, Sendler's activities were discovered by the Gestapo. She was arrested, brutally tortured, and sentenced to death. Despite the severe beatings that left her with permanent physical injuries, Sendler refused to reveal the identities of the children she had saved or the locations of her records. On the day of her scheduled execution, Zagota members managed to bribe a guard to release her, and she escaped with her life. Though forced to go into hiding, Sendler continued her rescue work under a new identity, using the false name Clara Debna. She survived the war and returned to retrieve the buried records containing the identities of the children she had saved. Tragically, most of the children's parents had perished in the Holocaust, but Sendler's records allowed some survivors to learn what had happened to their children and, in some cases, to reunite with them. After the war, Sendler continued her social work, though her activities during the war were not widely recognized during the communist era in Poland. It was only decades later that her story began to receive international attention. In 1999, a group of high school students in Kansas learned about Sendler's story and created a play called Life in a Jar, which brought her remarkable story to audiences around the world. Sendler was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize in 2007, though she ultimately did not receive it. She passed away in 2008 at the age of 98, but her legacy lives on through the thousands of lives she saved and their descendants. It is estimated that Sendler and her network rescued approximately 2,500 Jewish children from the Warsaw Ghetto. Each of these children represented a victory against the Nazi machinery of death and a testament to the power of human compassion in the face of overwhelming evil. Irina Sendler's story challenges us to consider what we might be willing to risk for the sake of others. Her actions demonstrate that moral courage is not the absence of fear, but the determination to do what is right despite fear. In a world that often seems divided by differences of religion, ethnicity, and nationality, Sendler's example reminds us of our shared humanity and the moral imperative to protect the most vulnerable among us. Her humility in the face of recognition was as remarkable as her courage during the war. She often downplayed her heroism, saying she had simply done what needed to be done and regretting only that she couldn't have saved more children. In a world that often celebrates power and aggression, Irina Sendler represents a different kind of heroism, one based on compassion, self-sacrifice, and an unwavering commitment to the value of every human life. Her story reminds us that even in the darkest of times, there are those who will risk everything to light candles in the darkness, and that these individual acts of courage and compassion can ripple through history, touching countless lives in ways we may never fully comprehend. Chapter 10, Alan Turing, the codebreaker who saved millions and was punished for it in the desperate struggle against Nazi Germany during World War II, when the outcome hung in the balance and the future of democracy seemed uncertain. A brilliant mathematician's work would prove decisive in turning the tide of war, yet his story would be marred by tragedy and injustice. Alan Turing was born in 1912 in London, England, displaying from an early age the signs of extraordinary intellectual ability that would characterize his entire life. His parents were in India as part of the civil service, leaving Turing and his brother in the care of friends and relatives in England. This somewhat isolated childhood may have contributed to the independent and sometimes socially awkward nature that would define much of his personality. Turing's academic journey began at Sherborne School, where his teachers often recognized his mathematical genius, but were frustrated by his tendency to focus on his own interests rather than the prescribed curriculum. It was at Sherborne that Turing developed a deep friendship with Christopher Morcom, a fellow student who shared his passion for science and mathematics. Morcom's sudden death from tuberculosis in 1930 devastated Turing, but also intensified his resolve to pursue the scientific questions that had fascinated them both. This experience of loss and the search for meaning would later influence his philosophical and scientific work. Turing went on to study at King's College, Cambridge, where he thrived in the intellectually stimulating environment. In 1936, he published his groundbreaking paper on computable numbers, which introduced the concept of a universal computing machine, now known as the Turing machine, that could theoretically compute anything that is computable. This work laid the theoretical foundation for modern computer science and established Turing as one of the most important mathematical thinkers of his generation. After completing his PhD at Princeton University, where he studied under the influential logician Alonzo Church, Turing returned to Cambridge just as Europe was descending into war. When Britain declared war on Germany in September 1939, Turing was recruited to work at Bletchley Park, the secret center of British code-breaking efforts. His assignment was to work on breaking the German Enigma code, which the Nazis believed to be unbreakable and which they used to send encrypted military communications. The Enigma machine was extraordinarily complex, with its rotors creating billions of possible settings that changed daily. Breaking the code seemed an impossible task, yet Turing and his colleagues at Bletchley Park worked tirelessly to find a solution. Turing's contribution was decisive. He designed an electromechanical machine called the bomb, which could systematically test possible Enigma settings and significantly speed up the code-breaking process. His mathematical insights and engineering innovations were crucial to the success of the Bletchley Park codebreakers. By 1940, Turing and his team were regularly breaking Enigma messages, providing the Allies with invaluable intelligence about German military operations. The information gained from breaking Enigma was codenamed Ultra and proved decisive in numerous Allied victories, including the Battle of Britain, the North African Campaign, and the D-Day landings. Historians estimate that Turing's work shortened the war by at least 2 years and saved millions of lives. Yet this crucial contribution remained a state secret for decades after the war, as the British government continued to use code-breaking methods developed at Bletchley Park and wanted to keep their capabilities hidden from potential adversaries. Beyond his work on Enigma, Turing made other important contributions to the war effort. He developed statistical techniques for breaking more complex German ciphers and worked on speech encryption systems for secure communications between Allied leaders. His versatility and innovative thinking made him one of the most valuable assets at Bletchley Park. After the war, Turing continued his pioneering work in computing, designing the automatic computing engine ACE, one of the first designs for a stored program computer. He also turned his attention to artificial intelligence, proposing what became known as the Turing test, as a way to determine whether a machine could exhibit intelligent behavior indistinguishable from that of a human. In 1952, Turing's life took a tragic turn when he was arrested and prosecuted for homosexual acts, which were illegal in Britain at the time. Given the choice between prison and chemical castration, Turing chose the latter, undergoing hormonal treatment that had devastating physical and psychological effects. His security clearance was revoked, and he was barred from continuing his cryptographic work for the British government. The man who had helped save Britain from Nazi tyranny was now treated as a criminal by the very country he had served so faithfully. On June 7, 1954, Turing died of cyanide poisoning. The official verdict was suicide, though some have speculated that his death might have been accidental. He was only 41 years old, with his most productive years still ahead of him. For decades after his death, Turing's full contribution to the war effort remained classified, and his story was known only to a few. It was only in the 1970s that information about Bletchley Park and the breaking of Enigma began to emerge, revealing Turing's crucial role in Allied victory. As the full scope of his achievements became known, Turing gradually received the recognition he deserved. In 2009, British Prime Minister Gordon Brown issued an official apology on behalf of the British government for the way Turing had been treated. In 2013, Queen Elizabeth II granted him a posthumous royal pardon. Today, Turing is celebrated as a founding father of computer science and artificial intelligence, and his story is seen as a powerful example of both human brilliance and the devastating consequences of prejudice and intolerance. The Turing test remains a fundamental concept in AI research, and his theoretical work on computation continues to influence the development of modern computing technology. Alan Turing's life embodies both the heights of human achievement and the depths of human cruelty. His intellectual brilliance helped save the world from fascism, yet his personal life was destroyed by the very society he had protected. His story challenges us to reflect on the complex relationship between individual achievement and social acceptance, and on the ways in which prejudice can rob humanity of its greatest minds. In recognizing Turing's contributions, we not only honor a remarkable individual, but also acknowledge the injustices that prevented him from continuing his groundbreaking work. His legacy reminds us that progress depends not only on intellectual ability, but also on creating a society that values and protects all its members, regardless of their differences. Chapter 11, The Unrecognized Innovators: How History Erases Contributors. The stories of Mary Anning, Lewis Howard Latimer, Katherine Johnson, Qin Xiang Wu, Sybil Ludington, Bessie Coleman, Vasily Arkhipov, Hugh Thompson, Irina Sendler, and Alan Turing represent just a fraction of the countless individuals whose contributions to human progress have been overlooked, minimized, or deliberately erased from historical memory. These forgotten heroes share common threads in their experiences despite working in different fields and different historical periods. Many faced discrimination based on their gender, race, or social class. Others were overshadowed by more charismatic contemporaries or lost in the tumult of major historical events. Still others made discoveries so far ahead of their time that society was not ready to recognize their significance. The systematic exclusion of these individuals from our collective memory is not accidental, but reflects deeper patterns in how history is recorded and whose voices are amplified. Throughout human civilization, the narratives that survive the ravages of time are often those that serve the interests of the powerful, reinforce existing social hierarchies, or align with prevailing cultural values. This selective memory has created vast blind spots in our understanding of the past, leaving remarkable individuals languishing in the shadows of anonymity. The process by which contributors are erased from history is complex and multifaceted. In some cases, it involves the deliberate suppression of information, as when the contributions of women scientists were attributed to their male colleagues, or when the achievements of people from marginalized communities were minimized to maintain existing power structures. In other cases, it reflects the unconscious biases of historians and storytellers who naturally gravitate toward narratives that fit familiar patterns and reinforce existing beliefs. The commercial and educational systems that disseminate historical knowledge also play a role in determining which stories receive widespread attention. Textbooks, museums, and popular media tend to focus on a relatively small number of historical figures, creating a canon of great men, and occasionally women, that excludes many important contributors. This narrow focus not only distorts our understanding of the past, but also limits the range of role models available to future generations. The consequences of this historical erasure are profound. When certain groups are consistently excluded from historical narratives, it reinforces the perception that they have not contributed significantly to human progress. This can create self-fulfilling prophecies, discouraging members of marginalized groups from pursuing fields where they see few predecessors. It also deprives society of the full breadth of human inspiration, limiting our understanding of what is possible and who can achieve it. The process of recovering these forgotten stories is itself a form of historical justice. By restoring these individuals to their rightful place in history, we not only set the record straight, but also challenge the assumptions and biases that led to their exclusion in the first place. This process requires digging through archives, questioning established narratives, and sometimes confronting uncomfortable truths about our collective past. It also demands a willingness to expand our definition of what constitutes historical significance, recognizing that important contributions come in many forms and from many sources. The digital age has created new opportunities for recovering and sharing these forgotten stories. Online databases, digital archives, and social media platforms have democratized historical research, allowing independent scholars and enthusiasts to contribute to the process of historical recovery. Crowdsourced projects and citizen history initiatives have helped uncover stories that might otherwise have remained hidden. Yet the challenge remains to integrate these recovered stories into mainstream historical narratives and educational curricula. This requires not just adding forgotten names to existing timelines, but rethinking the very structure of historical storytelling to accommodate a more diverse and inclusive range of contributors. It also means confronting the uncomfortable aspects of our past, including the systems of oppression and exclusion that led to these historical erasures. The stories of forgotten heroes remind us that history is not merely a collection of facts, but a continuous process of interpretation and reinterpretation. As our values evolve and our understanding deepens, we gain new perspectives on the past and new appreciation for individuals whose contributions were overlooked by previous generations. This ongoing process of historical revision is not a sign of weakness but of strength, reflecting our growing capacity to recognize and celebrate the full diversity of human achievement. The recovery of these forgotten stories also has important implications for how we think about innovation and progress. The traditional narrative of history often focuses on lone geniuses and sudden breakthroughs, but the reality is usually more complex and collaborative. Most significant advances build on the work of many individuals, some celebrated and many forgotten. By recognizing the collective nature of human progress, we develop a more accurate and humble understanding of how change happens and a greater appreciation for the many contributors who make it possible. As we continue to uncover and share these forgotten stories, we not only enrich our understanding of the past, but also create a more inclusive and inspiring vision of the future. The forgotten heroes of history remind us that talent and courage are not limited by race, gender, or social status, and that extraordinary contributions can come from unexpected sources. Their stories challenge us to look beyond familiar narratives and to recognize the potential for greatness in all people, regardless of their background or circumstances. Chapter 12. The Psychology of Recognition: Why Some Heroes Are Remembered and Others Forgot in the Process by which certain historical figures achieve lasting recognition, while others fade into obscurity, is not random, but follows patterns that reveal much about human psychology and social dynamics. Understanding these patterns can help us recognize our biases and create a more inclusive historical memory that honors a broader range of contributors to human progress. The psychology of recognition is influenced by multiple factors, including the narrative appeal of a story, the alignment with cultural values, the visibility of the individual during their lifetime, and the efforts made to preserve their legacy after their death. Stories that fit familiar narrative structures tend to be more memorable and more likely to be passed down through generations. The hero's journey narrative, with its elements of struggle, transformation, and triumph, resonates deeply with human psychology and is more likely to be remembered than stories that don't follow this pattern. This narrative bias helps explain why certain historical figures achieve legendary status while others, whose stories may be equally important but less narratively compelling, are forgotten. The cultural context in which a story is told also plays a crucial role in determining which heroes are remembered. Individuals whose achievements align with prevailing cultural values or serve contemporary political agendas are more likely to be celebrated and remembered. For example, during periods of national conflict, stories of military heroes and patriotic sacrifice tend to be emphasized, while during times of scientific advancement, innovators and discoverers receive more attention. This cultural filtering process means that historical memory is constantly being reshaped to serve the needs of the present, often at the expense of a more complete and accurate understanding of the past. The visibility of an individual during their lifetime significantly influences their chances of being remembered by future generations. People who had access to platforms for self-promotion, who were skilled at self-marketing, or who had powerful supporters to advocate for them, were more likely to leave behind a lasting legacy. This visibility bias helps explain why many forgotten heroes come from marginalized groups that lacked access to platforms for recognition during their lifetimes. Women, people of color, and individuals from lower social classes often made significant contributions, but lacked the social standing and connections necessary to ensure their stories were preserved and told. The efforts made to preserve an individual's legacy after their death also play a crucial role in determining their historical recognition. Individuals who had family members, students, or dedicated supporters who worked to archive their papers, write their biographies, or advocate for their recognition were more likely to be remembered by future generations. This preservation bias means that the historical record is not a neutral reflection of the past, but is shaped by the efforts of those who had the resources and motivation to ensure certain stories were preserved. The psychology of recognition is also influenced by cognitive biases that affect how we process and remember information. The availability heuristic, for example, makes us more likely to remember and believe stories that are easily brought to mind, which often means stories that are frequently repeated or emotionally compelling. The confirmation bias leads us to favor information that confirms our existing beliefs and values, making us more likely to remember and repeat stories that align with our worldview. These cognitive biases create a feedback loop in which familiar stories become more familiar, while unfamiliar stories remain obscure. The commercial and educational systems that disseminate historical knowledge also play a role in determining which heroes are remembered. Textbook publishers, museum curators, and filmmakers must make choices about which stories to include in their limited space and time, and these choices are influenced by commercial considerations, educational standards, and audience expectations. As a result, a relatively small number of historical figures receive the majority of public attention, while many others remain largely unknown to the general public. The process of historical recognition is also affected by what sociologists call the Matthew effect, named after the biblical passage that states, "For unto everyone that hath shall be given, and he shall have abundance." In the context of historical recognition, this means that individuals who already have some degree of fame or recognition are more likely to receive additional recognition, while those who are relatively unknown are more likely to remain so. This cumulative advantage helps explain why certain historical figures become increasingly famous over time, while others are gradually forgotten. The psychology of recognition is not merely an academic concern, but has real-world implications for how we understand ourselves and our potential. The heroes we remember serve as role models and sources of inspiration, shaping our aspirations and our understanding of what is possible. When certain groups are consistently excluded from the pantheon of recognized heroes, it sends a message about who is valued and who is not, with potentially limiting effects on the aspirations of members of those groups. Recognizing the psychological factors that influence historical remembrance can help us become more conscious of our biases and more intentional about creating a more inclusive historical memory. This involves actively seeking out and sharing stories that have been overlooked, questioning familiar narratives, and being willing to expand our definition of what constitutes heroism and significance. It also means recognizing that historical memory is not a fixed entity, but a living process that requires ongoing effort and attention to ensure it reflects the full diversity of human experience and achievement. The stories of forgotten heroes remind us that historical recognition is not merely a matter of recording what happened, but of choosing what to remember and why. These choices reflect our values and priorities as a society, and they have the power to shape how future generations understand the past and envision the future. By becoming more conscious of the psychology of recognition, we can make more informed choices about which stories to preserve and celebrate, creating a historical memory that is more accurate, inclusive, and inspiring. Chapter 13, The the legacy of forgotten heroes, how their contributions shape our world. Today, the contributions of forgotten heroes continue to shape our world in ways both obvious and subtle, influencing our technology, our scientific understanding, our social structures, and our cultural values. Though their names may not be widely known, their innovations, discoveries, and acts of courage have created ripples through time that continue to affect our daily lives. Understanding these connections not only honors their memory, but also deepens our appreciation for the complex tapestry of human progress and the many hands that have woven it. Mary Anning's fossil discoveries fundamentally changed our understanding of Earth's history and the development of life, laying groundwork for the theory of evolution and the field of paleontology. Today, when we visit natural history museums and marvel at the skeletons of dinosaurs and ancient marine reptiles, we are benefiting from Anning's pioneering work. Her discoveries helped establish the concept of deep time, challenging the prevailing view that Earth was only a few thousand years old and opening the door to modern geological and evolutionary thinking. This understanding of our planet's long history and the extinction of species has important implications for how we think about environmental change and our responsibility to protect biodiversity. Lewis Howard Latimer's improvements to the light bulb made electric lighting practical and affordable for everyday use, transforming how we live, work, and interact with our environment. The widespread availability of electric light extended productive hours beyond daylight, changed architectural design, and created new forms of entertainment and social interaction. Latimer's work also exemplifies how technological progress often depends on the contributions of many individuals, not just the famous inventors who receive most of the credit. His story reminds us that innovation is a collaborative process that builds on the insights and efforts of numerous contributors, many of whom remain in the shadows of history. Katherine Johnson's mathematical calculations were crucial to the success of the American space program, enabling the first human spaceflights and the moon landings that captured the world's imagination. Today, as we rely on GPS navigation, satellite communication, and weather forecasting, we are benefiting from the space program that Johnson helped make possible. Her story also serves as an inspiration to women and minorities in STEM fields, demonstrating that mathematical talent and scientific insight are not limited by race or gender. The recent recognition of Johnson and her fellow, human computers, has helped correct the historical record and provide role models for a new generation of scientists and mathematicians. Qin Xiang Wu's experiment demonstrating parity violation overturned a fundamental assumption in physics and opened new avenues for understanding the basic laws governing the universe. Her work contributed to the development of the Standard Model of particle physics, which forms the foundation of modern physics. The technologies that have emerged from our understanding of particle physics, including medical imaging technologies like PET scans and radiation therapy for cancer treatment, are part of Wu's legacy. Her story also highlights the ongoing challenges faced by women in science and the importance of ensuring that all contributors to scientific progress receive appropriate recognition. Sybil Ludington's courageous ride during the American Revolution exemplifies the often overlooked contributions of women to the founding of the United States. Her story challenges the traditional narrative of the Revolution, which tends to focus on male figures, and reminds us that the struggle for independence involved people of all ages and genders. The recognition of Ludington and other women who contributed to the revolutionary cause helps create a more complete and inclusive understanding of American history and provides a broader range of role models for young people learning about their nation's founding. Bessie Coleman's achievements as the first African-American woman to earn a pilot's license broke barriers in aviation and inspired future generations of pilots and astronauts. Her determination to overcome racial and gender obstacles in pursuit of her dreams created a legacy that extends beyond aviation to symbolize the broader struggle for equality and opportunity. The Tuskegee Airmen and other African American pioneers in aviation followed in the path that Coleman blazed, and today's diverse corps of pilots and astronauts stands on her shoulders. Her story reminds us that progress often depends on individuals who are willing to challenge limitations and expand the boundaries of what is considered possible. Vasily Arkhipov's decision to prevent the launch of a nuclear torpedo during the Cuban Missile Crisis may have saved the world from nuclear war, a legacy that continues to shape our understanding of Cold War history and the ongoing risks of nuclear weapons. His story highlights the importance of individual judgment and restraint in crisis situations and serves as a powerful argument for diplomatic solutions to international conflicts. In an era when nuclear proliferation remains a global concern, Arkhipov's example of calm decision-making under extreme pressure provides a model for responsible leadership in possession of weapons of mass destruction. Hugh Thompson's intervention during the My Lai massacre represents a powerful example of moral courage in the midst of war and has influenced military ethics training and our understanding of the moral complexities of armed conflict. His actions remind us that even in the most difficult circumstances, individuals have the capacity to make moral choices, and that these choices can have profound consequences. The ongoing discussions about military ethics, the laws of war, and the responsibilities of soldiers to disobey unlawful orders are part of Thompson's legacy, challenging us to consider how to maintain moral standards even in the chaos of warfare. Irina Sendler's rescue of Jewish children during the Holocaust exemplifies the power of individual compassion and courage in the face of systematic evil. Her story has inspired countless people to stand up against injustice and to protect the vulnerable, even at great personal risk. The organizations and individuals who continue to work for human rights, refugee protection, and the protection of children in conflict zones are part of Sendler's legacy, demonstrating that her example of moral courage continues to inspire action decades after her heroic deeds. Alan Turing's theoretical work laid the foundation for modern computer science and artificial intelligence, technologies that have transformed virtually every aspect of modern life. From the smartphones we carry to the medical diagnostics that help save lives, the digital revolution that Turing helped envision continues to reshape our world. His story also highlights the tragic consequences of prejudice and discrimination, reminding us that social progress and technological progress are interconnected, and that creating a society that values all its members is essential to realizing the full potential of human talent. The legacies of these forgotten heroes are not confined to their specific fields or historical periods, but continue to influence our world in countless ways. Their stories challenge us to look beyond familiar narratives and to recognize the many contributors who have shaped our world. They also remind us that progress is not inevitable, but depends on the courage, insight, and determination of individuals who are willing to challenge limitations, pursue new possibilities, and stand up for their convictions. As we continue to benefit from their contributions, we have a responsibility to remember their stories and to honor their memory by creating a world that values and recognizes the contributions of all people, regardless of their background or circumstances. Chapter 14: The Responsibility of Memory: Why We Must Remember Forgotten Heroes. The act of remembering forgotten heroes is not merely an academic exercise, but a moral responsibility with profound implications for how we understand ourselves and our potential. When we allow the contributions of remarkable individuals to fade from collective memory, we not only do injustice to their legacy, but also impoverish our understanding of human achievement and limit the inspiration available to future generations. The responsibility of memory extends beyond simple historical accuracy to encompass our duty to create a more inclusive and equitable society that recognizes and values the contributions of all its members. Remembering forgotten heroes is an act of justice that corrects historical wrongs and restores dignity to individuals whose achievements were overlooked or deliberately suppressed. Many of these heroes faced discrimination and marginalization during their lifetimes, and their exclusion from historical memory represents a continuation of this injustice. By recovering and sharing their stories, we acknowledge the barriers they faced and honor their perseverance in overcoming these obstacles. This act of historical restoration is not about rewriting history, but about completing it, ensuring that our understanding of the past includes all those who contributed to human progress. The responsibility of memory also has important educational implications. When our historical narratives include a diverse range of contributors, we provide students with role models who reflect the full diversity of human experience and potential. This is particularly important for young people from marginalized groups who may not see themselves represented in traditional historical accounts. By learning about forgotten heroes from various backgrounds, students can develop a more expansive vision of what is possible and a deeper appreciation for the many ways individuals can contribute to society. Remembering forgotten heroes also challenges the simplistic narratives that often dominate our understanding of history and progress. The traditional focus on a relatively small number of great men creates a distorted picture of how change happens, suggesting that progress is primarily the result of individual genius rather than collective effort. By recognizing the many contributors who have shaped our world, we develop a more accurate and humble understanding of the complex processes that drive human advancement. This more nuanced understanding can help us approach contemporary challenges with greater appreciation for collaboration and diverse perspectives. The responsibility of memory extends to how we think about innovation and creativity in our own time. When we recognize that many important contributions have come from unexpected sources and overlooked individuals, we become more open to recognizing and nurturing talent wherever it appears. This can lead to more inclusive and effective systems for identifying and developing human potential, benefiting individuals and society alike. In fields ranging from scientific research to artistic creation, a more inclusive approach to recognizing contributions can accelerate progress and innovation. Remembering forgotten heroes also has important social and political implications. When historical narratives exclude certain groups, it reinforces the perception that these groups have not played significant roles in shaping society. This can be used to justify ongoing inequalities and to maintain existing power structures. By creating a more inclusive historical memory, we challenge these justifications and create a foundation for a more equitable society. The stories of forgotten heroes demonstrate that talent, courage, and insight are not limited by race, gender, or social status, and that society benefits when all people have the opportunity to develop and contribute their abilities. The responsibility of memory also involves recognizing the ongoing processes that lead to historical erasure and working to counteract these processes in our own time. This means being conscious of whose stories are being told and whose are being ignored, questioning established narratives, and actively seeking out and amplifying overlooked voices. It also means creating systems and institutions that preserve a more diverse range of historical materials and support the work of historians and storytellers who focus on underrepresented groups. The digital age has created both opportunities and challenges for fulfilling the responsibility of memory. On one hand, digital technologies have made it easier to preserve and share historical information, allowing for more democratic and inclusive approaches to historical storytelling. Online archives, crowdsourced research projects, and social media platforms have helped recover and disseminate stories that might otherwise have remained hidden. On the other hand, the sheer volume of digital information and the rapid pace of online communication can make it difficult to separate significant contributions from ephemeral content, potentially creating new forms of historical erasure. The responsibility of memory is not limited to historians and educators, but extends to all members of society. Each of us can play a role in remembering forgotten heroes by sharing their stories, supporting inclusive historical education, and challenging narratives that exclude or marginalize certain groups. We can also support organizations and institutions that work to preserve and share diverse historical materials and that advocate for more inclusive approaches to history. Remembering forgotten heroes is ultimately an act of hope and optimism about human potential. By recognizing the many ways individuals have contributed to human progress despite facing significant barriers, we affirm the belief that talent and courage are widespread, and that given the opportunity, all people can achieve remarkable things. This optimistic vision of human potential can inspire us to create a society that more fully realizes this potential by removing barriers and recognizing contributions wherever they appear. The responsibility of memory is not just about looking back, but about looking forward and creating a future that honors the full diversity of human achievement and potential. As we remember the forgotten heroes of the past, we commit to creating a world where fewer contributions will be overlooked, and where all individuals have the opportunity to be recognized for their talents and their courage. In this way, the act of remembering becomes not just a tribute to the past, but a promise for the future. Chapter 15. The continuing journey discovering more forgotten heroes. The process of uncovering forgotten heroes is ongoing, with new stories emerging as historians, researchers, and enthusiasts delve deeper into archives, question established narratives, and apply new perspectives to historical events. Each recovered story adds to our understanding of the past and challenges us to expand our definition of who qualifies as a historical figure worthy of recognition. The continuing journey of discovery reminds us that history is not a fixed collection of facts, but a living conversation between the past and present, constantly evolving as new voices are heard and new perspectives are considered. Among the many forgotten heroes whose stories are gradually being recovered are women who made significant contributions to science but were overlooked due to gender discrimination. Rosalind Franklin, for example, played a crucial role in the discovery of the structure of DNA through her X-ray crystallography work, yet her contributions were largely overshadowed by James Watson and Francis Crick, who received the Nobel Prize for the discovery. Similarly, Nettie Stevens discovered the chromosomal basis of sex determination, but her work was initially attributed to her male colleague. The recovery of these stories not only sets the historical record straight, but also provides important role models for women in science today. The contributions of indigenous peoples to various fields of knowledge are another area where forgotten heroes are being rediscovered. For centuries, the traditional ecological knowledge of indigenous communities was dismissed as unscientific, yet modern researchers are increasingly recognizing the sophistication and value of this knowledge. Indigenous agricultural practices, medicinal knowledge, and environmental management techniques are now being studied and incorporated into contemporary approaches to sustainability and health care. The individuals who developed and preserved this knowledge over generations represent a vast category of forgotten heroes whose contributions are only beginning to be recognized. In the field of technology, many innovations attributed to famous inventors were actually developed or improved upon by lesser-known individuals. Hedy Lamarr, the famous actress, was also a brilliant inventor who developed frequency-hopping technology that forms the basis of modern Wi-Fi and Bluetooth communication. Garrett Morgan, an African-American inventor, created the first traffic signal and a breathing device that preceded the modern gas mask. These stories challenge the myth of the lone genius and highlight the collaborative nature of technological progress. The world of art and literature also contains many forgotten heroes whose works influenced more famous creators or whose contributions were marginalized due to their identity or circumstances. Zora Neale Hurston, an important figure of the Harlem Renaissance, fell into obscurity before her work was rediscovered decades later. Artemisia Gentileschi, a brilliant Baroque painter, faced significant barriers as a woman in 17th century Italy, but created powerful works that are only now receiving the recognition they deserve. The recovery of these artistic voices enriches our cultural heritage and challenges the narrow canon that has traditionally dominated our understanding of art history. In the realm of social and political change, many activists and organizers who played crucial roles in various movements have been overshadowed by more charismatic leaders. Bayard Rustin, for example, was the chief organizer of the 1963 March on Washington and a key advisor to Martin Luther King Jr., but his contributions were often downplayed due to his homosexuality and his former affiliation with the Communist Party. Similarly, many women who played important roles in the civil rights movement, such as Ella Baker and Diane Nash, have received less recognition than their male counterparts. The process of discovering forgotten heroes is not without its challenges. Historical records are often incomplete, particularly for marginalized groups who may not have had access to the means of preserving their stories. The biases of previous historians can make it difficult to separate fact from legend or to interpret sources within their proper context. Additionally, the process of recovery can sometimes lead to debates about historical interpretation and about which stories deserve the most attention. Despite these challenges, the continuing journey of discovery is essential for creating a more complete and inclusive understanding of the past. Each recovered story adds to our collective knowledge and challenges us to reconsider our assumptions about who contributed to human progress and how change happens. This process of discovery is not just about adding names to a list, but about rethinking the very structure of historical narratives to accommodate a more diverse range of experiences and contributions. The digital age has created new opportunities for discovering forgotten heroes. Online databases, digital archives, and social media platforms have democratized historical research, allowing independent scholars and enthusiasts to contribute to the process of historical recovery. Crowdsourced projects and citizen history initiatives have helped uncover stories that might otherwise have remained hidden. These technological tools, combined with a growing recognition of the importance of inclusive history, are accelerating the process of discovery and bringing more forgotten heroes to light. As we continue to discover more forgotten heroes, we also develop a more sophisticated understanding of the complex factors that lead to some individuals being remembered while others are forgotten. This understanding can help us become more conscious of our own biases and more intentional about creating a historical memory that honors a broader range of contributors. It also reminds us that the process of historical recovery is ongoing and that there are likely many more stories waiting to be discovered. The continuing journey of discovering forgotten heroes is ultimately a journey of self-discovery for humanity as a whole. By uncovering the diverse ways individuals have contributed to progress and facing the barriers that prevented many from receiving recognition, we learn more about our collective potential and our collective failures. This knowledge can inspire us to create a future that more fully realizes human potential by ensuring that all contributions are recognized and all individuals have the opportunity to develop their talents and make their mark on the world. In this way, the process of discovering forgotten heroes is not just about looking back, but about moving forward toward a more inclusive and equitable future. Chapter 16, The Global Perspective: Forgotten Heroes Around the World. While the stories we've explored so far have primarily focused on individuals from Western contexts, The phenomenon of forgotten heroes is truly global, with remarkable individuals in every culture and region whose contributions have been overlooked or marginalized. Expanding our perspective to include forgotten heroes from around the world not only enriches our understanding of global history, but also challenges the Eurocentric narratives that have often dominated historical accounts. This global perspective reveals the universal human capacity for courage, innovation, and compassion, while also highlighting the diverse ways these qualities have been expressed across different cultures and historical periods. In Asia, numerous individuals have made significant contributions that have not received the recognition they deserve. Wangari Maathai, the Kenyan environmentalist and political activist, founded the Green Belt movement, which focused on planting trees, environmental conservation, and women's rights. She was the first African woman to receive the Nobel Peace Prize, yet her contributions to environmental activism and sustainable development are not widely known outside certain circles. Similarly, Dr. Kamar Zaman, a Pakistani physician, made significant contributions to the treatment of tuberculosis and established healthcare systems in rural Pakistan, but his work remains largely unknown internationally. In Africa, many leaders of anti-colonial movements and nation-building efforts have been overlooked in Western historical narratives. Patrice Lumumba, the first prime minister of the independent Congo, played a crucial role in the decolonization of Africa, but was assassinated in a Cold War conspiracy that involved multiple foreign intelligence agencies. His story represents the complex and often tragic struggle for true independence in post-colonial Africa. Similarly, Funmilayo Ransome Kuti, a Nigerian feminist and political activist, campaigned for women's rights and against colonial rule, but her contributions have been largely overshadowed by those of her more famous son, the musician Fela Kuti. In Latin America, many indigenous leaders and activists who fought for land rights and cultural preservation have been marginalized in historical accounts. Bartolina Sisa, an Aymara woman who led a major indigenous uprising against Spanish colonial rule in Bolivia in the late 18th century, is remembered in indigenous communities, but largely unknown in broader historical narratives. More recently, Berta Cáceres, a Honduran environmental activist and indigenous leader, campaigned against the construction of dams and other projects that threatened indigenous lands and resources before being assassinated in 2016. Her story highlights the ongoing struggles of indigenous activists and the risks they face in defending their rights and their environment. In the Middle East, many scholars, scientists, and artists from the Islamic Golden Age have been overlooked in Western historical accounts, which often skip from classical antiquity to the European Renaissance. Ibn al-Haytham, an 11th century Arab mathematician and astronomer, made significant contributions to optics and the scientific method, laying groundwork for later European scientists. Fatima al-Fihri, a 9th century Tunisian woman, founded the University of Al-Qarawiyyin in Morocco, recognized by UNESCO as the oldest existing, continually operating educational institution in the world. These stories challenge the narrative that scientific and educational progress was primarily a European phenomenon. In Oceania, many indigenous navigators, leaders, and cultural figures have been overlooked in historical accounts that focus on European exploration and colonization. Maori leader Te Kuti fought against colonial encroachment in New Zealand and developed a unique religious movement that continues to influence Maori culture today. Similarly, Aboriginal Australian leaders like Pemulwuy and Yagin led resistance against British colonization, but are rarely mentioned in standard Australian historical accounts. The global perspective on forgotten heroes also reveals how different cultures conceptualize heroism and historical significance. Western narratives often focus on individual achievement and dramatic breakthroughs, while many other cultures emphasize collective action, continuity with tradition, and the preservation of knowledge. These different perspectives can enrich our understanding of what constitutes a meaningful contribution to human progress and challenge us to broaden our definition of heroism. The process of recovering forgotten heroes from around the world also highlights the ongoing impact of colonialism and cultural imperialism on historical narratives. The dominance of Western historical accounts has often marginalized or erased the contributions of people from colonized regions, creating a distorted picture of global history that centers European experiences and perspectives. Decolonizing historical narratives involves not just adding forgotten names to existing timelines, but fundamentally rethinking how we structure and interpret global history. The digital age has created new opportunities for sharing stories of forgotten heroes from around the world, allowing for more diverse and inclusive historical narratives. Online platforms, digital archives, and social media have made it possible for people from different cultures to share their historical perspectives and challenge dominant narratives. This democratization of historical storytelling has the potential to create a more balanced and inclusive global history that recognizes the contributions of people from all regions and cultures. Recognizing forgotten heroes from around the world is not just about historical accuracy, but about creating a more equitable global society. When people from all cultures see their histories and their contributions represented and valued, it affirms their place in the global community and challenges the hierarchies that have often characterized international relations. This recognition can also foster greater cross-cultural understanding and appreciation for the diverse ways human beings have contributed to progress and knowledge. The global perspective on forgotten heroes reminds us that remarkable individuals and their contributions are not limited to any particular culture or region. Courage, innovation, and compassion are universal human qualities that have been expressed in diverse ways throughout history and across the globe. By expanding our historical vision to include forgotten heroes from around the world, we not only set the record straight, but also create a richer and more inspiring picture of human potential and achievement. This global perspective challenges us to look beyond familiar narratives and to recognize the many ways individuals have shaped our world, often in the face of significant barriers and with little recognition for their efforts. Chapter 17: The Institutional Barriers Why Systems Overlook Contributions. The phenomenon of forgotten heroes is not merely the result of individual oversight or the passage of time, but is often rooted in systemic barriers within educational institutions, media organizations, and cultural institutions that determine which stories are told and which are ignored. Understanding these institutional barriers is essential for addressing the root causes of historical erasure and creating more inclusive systems for recognizing and preserving contributions from all segments of society. These barriers operate at multiple levels, from the explicit criteria used by award committees and textbook publishers to the implicit biases that influence whose stories are considered worthy of preservation and celebration. Educational institutions play a crucial role in determining which historical figures achieve lasting recognition. School curricula, textbooks, and academic standards often focus on a relatively narrow range of historical figures, leaving little room for the inclusion of overlooked contributors. This narrow focus is often justified by the limited time available for teaching history and the need to cover certain core content, but it results in a distorted view of the past that excludes many important contributors. The process of creating educational standards and selecting textbook content is influenced by political considerations, commercial interests, and cultural biases, all of which can lead to the exclusion of certain stories and perspectives. Media organizations also play a significant role in determining which historical figures achieve public recognition. Films, television shows, documentaries, and news coverage have the power to bring historical figures to public attention, but they also tend to focus on stories that are considered commercially viable or that align with familiar narrative patterns. This commercial bias means that stories of forgotten heroes, particularly those whose narratives don't fit conventional patterns of heroism, are less likely to be adapted for popular media. Additionally, the lack of diversity among media creators and decision-makers can lead to a narrow range of stories being told, with certain perspectives and experiences consistently overlooked. Cultural institutions such as museums, libraries, and archives also play a crucial role in preserving and presenting historical narratives. These institutions determine which materials are collected, preserved, and exhibited, thereby shaping public understanding of the past. However, these institutions have historically reflected the biases and priorities of dominant groups, often collecting materials that document the experiences of privileged individuals while neglecting those of marginalized communities. The lack of resources for preserving and cataloging materials from underrepresented groups can lead to the loss of important historical documents and artifacts, making it more difficult to recover the stories of forgotten heroes. Award systems and recognition programs also contribute to the phenomenon of forgotten heroes by establishing criteria that favor certain types of contributions while overlooking others. Nobel Prizes, for example, have historically been awarded primarily to men and to individuals from Western countries, reflecting both the biases of the selection committees and the structural barriers that have prevented women and people from other regions from pursuing certain types of work. Similarly, national honors and recognition programs often reflect political considerations and cultural biases, leading to the exclusion of individuals who made significant contributions but were not aligned with prevailing power structures. The academic publishing industry also plays a role in determining which historical narratives achieve prominence. Academic journals and university presses often favor research that aligns with established paradigms and methodologies, making it more difficult for scholars working on overlooked topics or using innovative approaches to disseminate their findings. The peer review process, while intended to ensure quality, can sometimes reinforce existing biases and exclude perspectives that challenge conventional wisdom. Additionally, the high cost of academic books can limit their accessibility, preventing important research from reaching a broader audience. Professional associations and scholarly societies also contribute to the phenomenon of forgotten heroes through their conferences, publications, and recognition programs. These organizations often reflect the demographics and priorities of their fields, which can lead to the exclusion of certain topics and perspectives. The lack of diversity among leadership and members of these associations can reinforce existing biases and make it more difficult for scholars focusing on overlooked contributors to gain recognition and support. Funding agencies and research institutions also play a role in determining which historical narratives are explored and preserved. Grant programs and research priorities often favor established areas of study with clear methodologies and outcomes, making it more difficult for researchers working on overlooked topics or using innovative approaches to secure funding. The competitive nature of academic funding can also discourage risk-taking and interdisciplinary work, both of which are often necessary for uncovering forgotten heroes and challenging established narratives. The digital age has created new institutional barriers, even as it has opened up new opportunities for historical research and storytelling. The algorithms that determine what content is visible on social media platforms and search engines can reinforce existing biases, making it more difficult for stories of forgotten heroes to gain visibility. The commercialization of online platforms and the emphasis on engagement metrics can also prioritize sensational or familiar content over more nuanced or challenging historical narratives. Addressing these institutional barriers requires conscious effort and systemic change. Educational institutions need to review and revise their curricula to include a more diverse range of historical figures and perspectives. Media organizations need to diversify their creators and decision makers and be more intentional about telling overlooked stories. Cultural institutions need to prioritize the collection and preservation of materials from underrepresented groups and develop more inclusive approaches to exhibiting historical narratives. Award systems need to examine their criteria and selection processes to ensure they are not perpetuating existing biases. Academic publishers need to be more open to innovative approaches and diverse perspectives. Professional associations need to actively work to increase diversity among their leadership and members. Funding agencies need to support research on overlooked topics and using innovative methodologies. The process of addressing institutional barriers is not easy or straightforward, but it is essential for creating a more inclusive and accurate historical memory. By recognizing and challenging the systemic factors that lead to historical erasure, we can create systems that are more likely to recognize and preserve contributions from all segments of society. This not only honors the forgotten heroes of the past, but also creates a foundation for a more equitable future in which all contributions are valued and recognized. Chapter 18, The Personal Impact: How Forgotten Heroes Change, lives the stories of forgotten heroes, have the power to transform individual lives in profound and lasting ways. When people encounter these stories, particularly if they share aspects of identity or experience with the forgotten hero, it can reshape their understanding of their own potential and their place in history. This personal impact is one of the most important reasons for recovering and sharing the stories of overlooked contributors, as it demonstrates how historical memory is not just an academic concern, but a force that can inspire, validate, and empower individuals in their own journeys. The personal impact of forgotten heroes can be seen in the testimonials of students who discover figures who look like them or who faced similar obstacles, in the career choices inspired by learning about pioneers in various fields, and in the renewed sense of possibility that comes from seeing how others have overcome barriers to make meaningful contributions. For students from marginalized groups, encountering forgotten heroes who share their background can be a transformative experience. When a young African American student learns about Katherine Johnson's contributions to the space program, or when a Latina student discovers the story of Ellen Ochoa, the first Hispanic woman to go to space, it expands their vision of what is possible for someone like them. These representations matter not just because they provide role models, but because they challenge the internalized biases that can limit self-perception and aspiration. The psychological impact of seeing oneself reflected in historical narratives cannot be overstated, particularly for individuals who have been systematically underrepresented in traditional historical accounts. The personal impact of forgotten heroes is also evident in the career choices and life paths inspired by these stories. Many scientists, engineers, and other professionals have cited learning about pioneers in their field as a key factor in their decision to pursue their chosen career. When a young woman interested in physics learns about Qin-Shiung Wu's contributions to particle physics, or when a student of engineering discovers the innovations of Lewis Howard Latimer, it can provide the encouragement and validation needed to pursue a field where they may be underrepresented. These stories not only inspire career choices, but also provide a sense of connection to a broader community of contributors who have faced similar challenges and overcome similar obstacles. The stories of forgotten heroes can also have a profound emotional impact, providing validation and recognition to individuals who have faced similar barriers in their own lives. When someone who has experienced discrimination or marginalization learns about historical figures who faced similar obstacles but still managed to make significant contributions, it can provide a sense of solidarity and hope. These stories remind us that we are not alone in our struggles and that others have walked similar paths before us. This emotional connection can be particularly powerful for individuals who may feel isolated or discouraged by the challenges they face in their own lives. The personal impact of forgotten heroes also extends to how individuals understand their own heritage and family history. Many people discover forgotten heroes who share their cultural or regional background, leading to a deeper appreciation and pride in their heritage. This connection can be particularly meaningful for individuals from groups that have been historically marginalized or misrepresented in mainstream historical narratives. Learning about the contributions of people from one's own community or culture can counteract negative stereotypes and provide a more balanced and positive understanding of one's heritage. The stories of forgotten heroes can also inspire personal growth and development by modeling various forms of courage, perseverance, and integrity. When we learn about individuals like Hugh Thompson, who stood up for his principles in the face of intense pressure, or Irina Sendler, who risked her life to save others, it challenges us to consider our own values and how we might act in similar circumstances. These stories provide moral examples that can guide our own decision-making and inspire us to act with greater courage and compassion in our own lives. The personal impact of forgotten heroes is also evident in the creative and intellectual work they inspire. Artists, writers, musicians, and other creators often draw inspiration from historical figures, using their stories as a basis for creative expression and exploration. The process of bringing these stories to life through art can be deeply meaningful for both the creator and the audience, creating new connections between past and present and ensuring that these stories continue to resonate with new generations. The educational impact of forgotten heroes on individuals cannot be overstated. When students encounter a more diverse range of historical figures, it not only expands their knowledge, but also develops their critical thinking skills and their ability to question established narratives. This critical engagement with history can foster a more nuanced and sophisticated understanding of the past and its relationship to the present. It can also inspire a lifelong interest in history and a commitment to uncovering and sharing overlooked stories. The personal impact of forgotten heroes also extends to how individuals understand and engage with contemporary social issues. Many forgotten heroes were involved in struggles for justice, equality, and human rights, and their stories can provide perspective and inspiration for current movements. When activists learn about historical figures who fought similar battles, it can provide a sense of continuity and connection to broader struggles for justice. This historical perspective can inform strategy, provide encouragement during difficult times, and remind activists that they are part of a long tradition of working toward a more just and equitable society. The psychological impact of forgotten heroes on individuals from privileged groups should not be overlooked. When members of dominant groups learn about the contributions of individuals from marginalized communities, it can challenge their assumptions about history and progress. It can also foster empathy and a deeper understanding of the barriers that others have faced and continue to face. This expanded perspective can lead to greater support for diversity and inclusion efforts and a more nuanced understanding of how historical inequalities continue to affect contemporary society. The personal impact of forgotten heroes demonstrates why historical memory is not just an academic concern, but a force that shapes individual lives and possibilities. By recovering and sharing these stories, we not only honor the individuals who made these contributions, but also create opportunities for personal transformation and growth. This personal impact is perhaps the most powerful argument for why we must remember forgotten heroes and ensure that their stories continue to inspire and inform future generations. The ripple effects of these personal impacts can extend far beyond the individual, influencing families, communities, and ultimately society as a whole. When individuals are inspired, validated, and empowered by the stories of forgotten heroes, they are more likely to make their own contributions and to work toward a more inclusive and equitable society in which all contributions are recognized and valued. Chapter 19: The Digital Renaissance Technology and the Recovery of Lost Stories. The digital age has created unprecedented opportunities for recovering and sharing the stories of forgotten heroes, leading to a renaissance in historical memory that is transforming how we understand the past. Digital technologies have democratized historical research, allowing independent scholars, community historians, and enthusiasts to contribute to the process of uncovering overlooked stories. Online platforms have created new channels for sharing these stories with global audiences, while digital tools have made it possible to preserve and analyze historical materials in ways that were previously unimaginable. This digital renaissance is not just changing the scale and speed of historical discovery, but is also creating new forms of historical storytelling that can engage and inspire audiences in innovative ways. Digital archives have revolutionized access to historical materials, allowing researchers to consult documents, photographs, and other primary sources from anywhere in the world. Institutions like the Library of Congress, the British Library, and numerous university archives have digitized vast collections of materials, making them available to anyone with an internet connection. This increased accessibility has been particularly valuable for researchers studying overlooked topics, who may not have had the resources to travel to multiple archives to consult scattered materials. Digital archives have also made it possible to search across large collections of documents quickly and efficiently, helping researchers identify connections and patterns that might have been missed using traditional research methods. Crowdsourced research projects have harnessed the power of collective intelligence to recover stories of forgotten heroes. Platforms like Zooniverse allow volunteers to assist with tasks such as transcribing historical documents, identifying photographs, and tagging digital materials. These projects have made it possible to process and analyze large collections of historical materials much more quickly than would be possible through traditional academic channels. They have also created opportunities for members of the public to engage directly with historical materials and contribute to the process of historical discovery. This participatory approach to historical research not only accelerates the recovery of forgotten stories, but also fosters a broader public engagement with history. Social media platforms have created new channels for sharing stories of forgotten heroes with diverse audiences. Hashtags like hidden figures, untold stories, and forgotten heroes have helped bring attention to overlooked historical figures and create communities of people interested in recovering and sharing these stories. Visual platforms like Instagram and Pinterest have been particularly effective for sharing historical images and creating engaging visual narratives about forgotten heroes. These platforms have made it possible for stories that might otherwise remain confined to academic journals to reach viral audiences, inspiring interest and awareness among people who might not encounter these stories through traditional educational channels. Digital storytelling tools have enabled new forms of historical narrative that can engage audiences in innovative ways. Interactive timelines, virtual reality experiences, and digital exhibits allow users to explore historical events and figures in immersive and participatory ways. These tools can bring the stories of forgotten heroes to life by allowing users to virtually visit historical sites, examine primary sources, and explore connections between different historical figures and events. The interactive nature of these digital narratives can create deeper engagement and more meaningful learning experiences than traditional forms of historical presentation. Genealogy websites and DNA testing services have also contributed to the recovery of forgotten stories by helping individuals uncover their own family histories. As people research their genealogy, they often discover ancestors who made significant contributions but were not widely known. These personal discoveries can sometimes lead to broader historical research and the recovery of stories that might otherwise have remained hidden within family archives. DNA testing has also helped some individuals connect with cultural and ethnic heritage that may have been obscured by historical circumstances such as slavery, forced migration, or cultural assimilation. Artificial intelligence and machine learning are opening new possibilities for analyzing large collections of historical materials and identifying patterns that might not be apparent to human researchers. These technologies can be used to analyze texts, images, and other historical materials at scale, helping to identify connections between different historical figures and events. They can also assist with tasks such as handwriting recognition and language translation, making it possible to access and analyze historical materials that were previously difficult or impossible to work with. As these technologies continue to develop, they will likely play an increasingly important role in the recovery of forgotten stories. Digital mapping technologies have made it possible to visualize historical events and connections in geographic context, revealing patterns and relationships that might not be apparent from traditional textual sources. Projects mapping the routes of the Underground Railroad, the locations of women's suffrage events, or the networks of scientific collaboration can provide new insights into how historical movements and innovations developed. These geographic visualizations can also help identify gaps in historical knowledge and areas where further research might uncover forgotten stories. The digital renaissance in historical memory has also created new challenges and ethical considerations. The vast amount of historical information now available online can make it difficult to separate reliable sources from misinformation or to determine which stories are most historically significant. The rapid spread of information through social media can sometimes lead to the oversimplification or sensationalization of historical narratives. Additionally, questions of digital preservation and access have become increasingly important as digital formats can become obsolete and online content can be removed or altered. There are also important ethical considerations around the digitization and sharing of culturally sensitive materials, particularly those from indigenous communities or other groups that have experienced historical exploitation. Despite these challenges, the digital renaissance has fundamentally transformed the landscape of historical memory and created unprecedented opportunities for recovering and sharing the stories of forgotten heroes. The democratization of historical research and storytelling has allowed for a more diverse range of voices and perspectives to contribute to our understanding of the past. The increased accessibility of historical materials has made it possible for more people to engage with history and to uncover stories that might otherwise have remained hidden. The new forms of digital storytelling have created opportunities for more immersive and engaging historical narratives that can inspire and educate audiences in innovative ways. As digital technologies continue to evolve, they will likely play an even greater role in the recovery of forgotten stories and the creation of a more inclusive historical memory. The ongoing development of artificial intelligence, virtual reality, and other emerging technologies will open new possibilities for historical research and storytelling. At the same time, the increasing digital connectivity of global communities will facilitate the sharing of diverse historical perspectives and the collaboration of researchers and storytellers from around the world. This digital renaissance is not just changing how we learn about the past, but is transforming our very understanding of what counts as history and whose stories are worth telling. By harnessing these digital tools and platforms, we can create a historical memory that is more inclusive, more accurate, and more inspiring than ever before. Chapter 20: The Future of Memory, Ensuring No More Forgotten Heroes. As we look to the future, the challenge of ensuring that no more heroes are forgotten requires conscious effort and innovative approaches to how we record, preserve, and share historical narratives. The digital age has created both opportunities and new challenges for historical memory, and navigating this landscape will require thoughtful consideration of how we can create systems that are more inclusive, more resilient, and more responsive to the diverse contributions that shape our world. The future of memory depends not only on technological solutions, but on our collective commitment to creating a historical record that honors the full spectrum of human achievement and experience. This commitment involves rethinking educational systems, media practices, cultural institutions, and our own personal approaches to remembering and sharing stories. Educational systems will play a crucial role in shaping the future of historical memory. Curriculum development needs to move beyond the token inclusion of diverse figures to fundamentally restructure how history is taught and understood. This includes not just adding forgotten heroes to existing timelines, but rethinking the very structure of historical narratives to accommodate multiple perspectives and experiences. Teacher education programs need to prepare educators to teach history in ways that are inclusive, critical, and engaging, with an emphasis on helping students understand how historical narratives are constructed and whose voices have been included or excluded. Assessment systems need to value historical thinking skills over the memorization of names and dates, encouraging students to engage critically with historical sources and perspectives. The future of historical memory also depends on creating more diverse and inclusive media representations of the past. Film, television, and other media platforms have tremendous power to shape public understanding of history, and there is a growing recognition of the responsibility that comes with this power. Encouraging diversity among creators, writers, and directors can lead to more varied and authentic historical narratives. Supporting projects that focus on overlooked stories and perspectives can help bring forgotten heroes to wider audiences. Developing new forms of historical storytelling that leverage digital technologies can create more immersive and engaging experiences that resonate with contemporary audiences. Cultural institutions such as museums, libraries, and archives need to continue evolving to meet the challenges of preserving and presenting a more inclusive historical record. This includes actively seeking out materials from underrepresented communities and developing innovative approaches to exhibiting and interpreting these materials. Creating partnerships with community organizations and cultural groups can help ensure that historical narratives are presented with authenticity and respect. Investing in digital preservation technologies and developing sustainable strategies for maintaining digital collections can help ensure that historical materials remain accessible for future generations. The future of memory also depends on creating more equitable systems for recognizing and honoring contributions in real time before they become forgotten. Award systems, professional recognition programs, and other mechanisms for acknowledging achievement need to be examined for potential biases and restructured to ensure they are inclusive and fair. Creating platforms for recognizing diverse forms of contribution and achievement can help ensure that valuable work is not overlooked because it doesn't fit conventional patterns. Developing mentorship and support systems for individuals from underrepresented groups can help ensure that their contributions are recognized and valued as they are made. Technological innovation will continue to play a crucial role in shaping the future of historical memory. Artificial intelligence and machine learning can help analyze vast collections of historical materials and identify patterns and connections that might not be apparent to human researchers. Blockchain and other distributed ledger technologies could potentially be used to create more secure and transparent systems for documenting and verifying historical claims. Virtual and augmented reality technologies can create immersive historical experiences that bring forgotten stories to life in new and engaging ways. However, these technological solutions must be developed and implemented thoughtfully, with consideration for issues of access, privacy, and ethical use. The future of memory also depends on fostering a culture of historical consciousness and critical engagement with the past. This includes encouraging people to document their own experiences and contributions, particularly those from communities that have been historically underrepresented in archival collections. Supporting community-based historical projects and oral history initiatives can help preserve diverse perspectives and experiences. Teaching historical thinking skills and media literacy can help people navigate the complex landscape of historical information and misinformation. Creating opportunities for intergenerational dialogue and knowledge sharing can help ensure that stories and experiences are passed down and not lost. The global nature of contemporary challenges and communications requires a more international approach to historical memory. Developing collaborative projects that bring together historians, educators, and storytellers from different countries and cultures can help create more balanced and inclusive global historical narratives. Supporting translation and cross-cultural exchange can help ensure that stories of forgotten heroes from around the world reach wider audiences. Challenging Eurocentric and other culturally biased approaches to history can help create a more accurate and equitable understanding of global contributions to human progress. The future of memory also depends on addressing the economic and structural barriers that have historically led to the exclusion of certain stories and perspectives. This includes supporting independent historical research and storytelling projects that might not have commercial appeal, but are important for creating a complete historical record. Developing sustainable funding models for cultural institutions and educational initiatives can help ensure they are not dependent on commercial or political interests that might influence their narratives. Creating economic opportunities for historians, educators, and storytellers from diverse backgrounds can help ensure a more diverse range of voices in shaping historical memory. Perhaps most importantly, the future of memory depends on each of us taking personal responsibility for how we remember and share stories. This includes being conscious of whose stories we amplify and whose we ignore, questioning established narratives, and actively seeking out and sharing overlooked stories. It means recognizing that historical memory is not just the responsibility of professional historians, but a collective project that depends on the participation of all members of society. It also means understanding that our choices about what to remember and what to forget have real consequences for how we understand ourselves and our potential. As we look to the future, the goal is not merely to recover more forgotten heroes from the past, but to create systems and cultures that ensure fewer contributions are overlooked in the first place. This requires ongoing effort and vigilance, as biases and barriers continue to evolve and take new forms. It also requires a willingness to challenge our own assumptions and to expand our understanding of what constitutes a meaningful contribution to human progress. The future of memory is ultimately about creating a world in which all contributions are recognized and all individuals have the opportunity to be remembered for their talents, their courage, and their impact on the world. By working toward this future, we not only honor the forgotten heroes of the past, but create a foundation for a more inclusive and equitable world in which future generations will be able to see themselves reflected in the historical narrative and inspired by the diverse ways human beings have contributed to progress and knowledge. This is perhaps the greatest tribute we can offer to the forgotten heroes, whose stories we have recovered, and a promise to future generations that their contributions will not be forgotten. Conclusion: the enduring legacy of forgotten heroes. As we conclude this journey through the lives of forgotten heroes, we are reminded that history is not merely a collection of facts and dates, but a living tapestry woven from countless individual stories of courage, innovation, and perseverance. The remarkable individuals we have encountered, Mary Anning, Lewis Howard Latimer, Katherine Johnson, Qin Xiang Wu, Sybil Ludington, Bessie Coleman, Vasily Arkhipov, Hugh Thompson, Irina Sendler, and Alan Turing, represent just a fraction of the many contributors whose achievements have been overlooked or marginalized in historical narratives. Their stories challenge us to look beyond familiar accounts and to recognize the diverse ways human beings have shaped our world. They remind us that progress is not the result of a few exceptional individuals, but the collective effort of many, often working in the face of significant barriers and with little recognition for their contributions. The enduring legacy of these forgotten heroes extends far beyond their specific achievements in science, aviation, mathematics, politics, or humanitarian work. Their stories serve as powerful reminders of the human capacity for resilience in the face of adversity, for innovation in the pursuit of knowledge, and for moral courage in moments of crisis. They demonstrate that talent and insight are not limited by race, gender, or social status, but can flourish in unexpected places and under challenging circumstances. Perhaps most importantly, their stories challenge us to reconsider how we define heroism and significance, encouraging us to look beyond charismatic leaders and dramatic breakthroughs to recognize the many ways individuals contribute to human progress. The process of recovering and sharing these stories is not just about setting the historical record straight, but about creating a more inclusive and inspiring vision of human potential. When we recognize the contributions of individuals from diverse backgrounds and circumstances, we send a powerful message about the value of all human beings and the many ways people can make meaningful contributions to society. This recognition has practical implications for how we educate our children, how we structure our institutions, and how we think about our own potential and responsibilities. The stories of forgotten heroes also remind us that historical memory is not a neutral reflection of the past, but a selective process shaped by power, bias, and cultural values. By understanding how certain stories have been overlooked or marginalized, we become more conscious of the biases that continue to influence our contemporary judgments and decisions. This awareness can help us create more equitable systems and more inclusive narratives that honor the full spectrum of human achievement and experience. As we move forward, the challenge is not only to continue recovering the stories of forgotten heroes from the past, but to create systems and cultures that ensure fewer contributions are overlooked in the first place. This requires ongoing effort to identify and address the barriers that have historically led to the exclusion of certain stories and perspectives. It also requires a commitment to creating educational, cultural, and media institutions that reflect and celebrate the full diversity of human experience and achievement. The digital age has created unprecedented opportunities for this work, making historical materials more accessible, providing new platforms for sharing overlooked stories, and enabling new forms of collaboration and participation in historical research and storytelling. Yet technology alone cannot ensure a more inclusive historical memory. It must be accompanied by a collective commitment to questioning established narratives, seeking out diverse perspectives, and valuing contributions from all segments of society. The enduring legacy of forgotten heroes is ultimately measured not in how we remember them, but in how their stories inspire us to act in our own time. When we learn about individuals who overcame tremendous obstacles to make significant contributions, we are challenged to consider how we might overcome our own limitations and work toward the greater good. When we recognize how many contributions have been overlooked, we are inspired to look for and acknowledge the unsung heroes in our own communities and institutions. When we understand the complex factors that have led to historical erasure, we are motivated to create more equitable and inclusive systems for recognizing and preserving contributions in the future. The stories of forgotten heroes remind us that history is not something that happens to other people, but something in which we all participate. Each of us has the capacity to make contributions that will shape the future, and each of us has a responsibility to remember and honor the contributions of those who came before us. By embracing this responsibility, we not only pay tribute to the forgotten heroes of the past, but create a foundation for a future in which all contributions are recognized and all individuals have the opportunity to be remembered for their talents, their courage, and their impact on the world. In the end, the most enduring legacy of forgotten heroes is the hope and inspiration they provide to future generations. Their stories demonstrate that even in the face of tremendous obstacles, individuals can make a difference, that courage and compassion can triumph over hatred and indifference, and that the pursuit of knowledge and justice is a worthy and noble endeavor. These stories remind us that we are all part of a larger human story, connected across time and space by our shared capacity for brilliance, for resilience, and for making a positive impact on the world. As we carry these stories forward, we honor not only the individuals who made these contributions, but the very best of what it means to be human.